Hey, Mike, how's it going tonight?
Good, Frank.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
It's great to see you.
Good week?
Always great week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
so-
was a good week.
Yeah.
Weather's getting nice here. It's livable outside, you can get out.
It is. Throughout the meditations this week, this happens every so often. Not a lot. I wish it happened more, but I guess I can't wish for that. But I've been getting a lot of download information. It's just stuff that's like random. Okay, I write it down. And like you said, I don't really prepare for the show other than preparing myself just to be still.
Yeah.
And,
so. But I know what you mean. It's those moments, those aha.
Yeah, so thank God for technology. I put it in my phone. I have a notes aspect of my phone. So then I always have to see if I can remember.
Anything cool that you want to share to kind of start us off?
Yeah, well, as we go on, because I have to pull it out of my head because I don't have my phone on me. But yes, that doesn't
funny.
mean a whole lot.
I didn't even
right?
think about that. That's funny.
I need to get those lenses so I can see everything. No, because I guess what I want to touch on is last week we talked about the principle or the law of polarity, and I know I was talking to somebody about this, and empirically when we look at stuff, like the world around us, and come into the understanding of stuff, a lot of people look at things as oppositions, and at a certain level, like a base level of understanding life, it can seem to be, things can be like opposition, like conservatism or liberalism seem to be in opposition, but they're really not. They're just different degrees of the same thing. So at another level of understanding, as we get higher into this understanding of why we're here, or not why we're here, but how to function here more efficiently. That's really
how to utilize this instrument.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has an idea to why we're here, and I think every time I ask a question, I get close to it, I just lose it. So I'm no longer asking why I'm here, but how do I function in the world more efficient every time. And, frankly, this is why I do the show. I do the show to learn more. The more I talk about it and run the ideas through my head and through you, bounce it off, and then I go back into silence, the more I start to understand. But I come to an ultimate understanding that I don't know, which leaves me for more knowing.
Well, that's the thing. What we're talking about each week here, we're trying to describe the undescribable.
Yeah, language is a very interesting thing because language, I once heard somebody recently say this, and they said, language was created so we can lie to one another or to ourselves. And I thought that was a clever way. And it was tongue-in-cheek, but yet there was something there. And so, getting back to the understanding, when you get to a certain level of these principles, especially polarity, there are no opposites. And when I say opposite, the word opposite means opposition, fighting against. But we didn't come here to fight against. We came here to support each other. So two ends of a pole are what we call on the opposite side, but they don't oppose each other. They actually support each other. They come from a different degree of information. But each degree has its own value, which makes the other thing stand out and be worth something. So, without Alaska, how comfortable would Hawaii be? Mm-hmm. And for somebody, Alaska is comfortable, because Hawaii might be annoying. So, because I like Hawaii, and I don't necessarily, and it's this understanding, I love Hawaii, but I don't dislike Alaska.
It's just
That's
something
absurd.
different.
It's absurd, yeah.
Just something different.
It's something different. And I would never oppose it because at some point in my travels on this planet, I might be called to check it out.
Let's also point out that like and dislike are the disease of the mind.
Yeah. So it's more preference, not preference.
Yeah. But no, like that's what the give and take. I like being a conservative. I like being a liberal. It's you putting an impression that something is better than something else. And what Frank and I are saying is no you want to remain neutral.
Yeah.
There is no this is a greater than, best, better than. No. It's a neutrality.
Yeah, the more I study different walks of life in understanding, whether it's theology, science, mathematics, and I've always been drawn to read this book and that book, and now I understand why, because it's my excitement. But at the time when I'm reading, I don't know what the outcome is going to be for what the information is used for. But along the way, I realize right now, me reading about theology, science, philosophy, all these different things, I realize they're all speaking about the same thing. So there's a correlation there. It's just used in different languages. So a theologist might use certain type of metaphors, and a quantum physicist will use certain languages a lot of times in formulations of mathematics or what have you to explain the same thing. And if there isn't a proper translation, they'll argue. And that's when you understand there's no opposition. So if you look at, like, I mentioned this type of understanding before, but I'm going to use it differently. If you take a wheel, all right, and the hub would be the infinite source, and the infinite source is actually just suspended in the middle of it's just suspended. And what's creating the suspension is the spokes. And the spokes make it to the outside of the rim to actually support the rim. And the rim is what we call the physical world. It's the thing that hits the ground. All right? Now, this spoke and this spoke are on polar opposites, or they're poles, but they're supporting each other. But they're coming from the same thing. So directing, they're all supporting or being supported by the same thing. But if one thinks, this is an opposition to me, well, in the idea of the base level of understanding, I must get rid of opposition. But it becomes absurd, because if you got rid of all the spokes on the south hemisphere of the tire would collapse. And the northern hemisphere of the tire wouldn't be worth anything. And this is what's happening. Somehow, at the base level, governments put black against white, male against female, poor against rich. And one of the reasons I can only conclude they did that is just to serve a purpose in life. So they would become the referee, the person who breaks it up and puts things to ease. So, but if there was no boxing match to be had, what would a ref do? A ref would be out of work. So they have to create this opposition in order to come in and fix it and calm it down. But what are we opposing? When we look at it, it's absurd. We're all talking about the same thing. We all want the same thing. We just speak in different languages, just like the multitudes of languages on the planet. You get to know someone that's speaking a language, they sound differently, but yet what they're getting at or wanting is the same thing same thing as you and I. But because the language barrier, we think they're opposing us, and they're not. Look at the three main religions in the West. I might have mentioned this on the last podcast. But you got Judaism, Christianity, and Muslim. They're all come from the same place. They're talking about the same God. But because they use different languages, they fight each other. Now, you don't see a Muslim going after a Buddhist or a Christian going after a Buddhist, because they'll think, they're completely out of their mind. We're talking about a different God here, which really aren't.
No.
But it's interesting that we're talking about the same God in the understanding, at the rudimentary understanding. It's the same hub that's pushing the spokes out onto the rim of life, and we're arguing over it. So at the level that Mike and I are trying to get to and remain, which we are, I might waver, and getting other people to see, you get to this whole little level, there is no opposition. There are poles, though. I'm understanding.
That which is.
Yeah. So there are things.
You're not denying there's one or the other.
Yeah, because a seesaw needs a different pole in order to go. Just for electricity to go, we know we need what we call a positive and a negative pole in order for the circulation of the current of energy to move around. You lift the negative pole off. If you have a battery in your car and you want to get rid of all negative stuff out of your life, try pulling that negative off and see what happens to the car. Nothing.
Well, and guys, this scale that Frank's referring to, it all changes simply by your perspective. And that's really what Frank and I are getting at.
Shift your perspective.
How are you looking at it? Are you looking at this as if there is something good and something bad? Are you looking at it as a like and a dislike? Because that's how the mind has been conditioned to categorize and assign meaning to things your entire life. And so Frank and I are talking about recognizing the conditioning. Wow, my thinking mind is saying, this I prefer, this I like, this is right. Who is thinking that this is right? Who is thinking that this is the only way, good or bad?
Yeah.
It's a created self. It's a created thought pattern. It's a self-created person. It is an ego identity.
Yeah. And you know what's come, because obviously now a lot of people I know, and, we've been doing this like better off for 3 months now, as we put it out there. Like we're doing it a little bit longer, but we've been advertising for about 3 months now. And the audience is starting to grow. So I'm getting a lot of questions. So people often ask me about these understandings like, so what do we do about government? And I'm like, nothing. And, and I start off with that because it piques curiosity.
Well, it implies something is not right, which is...
Yeah, exactly. I says, but when you rise above it, the government doesn't affect you. And people, how does it affect you? And they lay out all these things, how it affects them. I'm like, yeah, at the base level, it does. It's almost like the analogy I use, I keep getting tackled. I want to stop getting tackled. Like, but you're on the football field, and tackling on the football field is something that is... and
they're saying why? And it's because you think there's only football.
Yeah, it's acceptable to be tackled on a football field. But if you don't want to be tackled, you must get off the football field. And I'm not implying that this level is better. It's just, it's greater. And so we want to, it's not that we want to change our government, because what are we going to change our government into? Something else. So the fall of the Roman Empire led us into the barbarians, and then we went through the Dark Ages. Then when the Renaissance came out, the barbarian states such as England, France, Germany, throughout the Europe and even into Eastern Europe, then they became sophisticated through art and everything else. But they turned back and created governments just like the Roman Empire did. And we're going back into that cycle. It's like, what do we want to do here? Do we want to do another cycle of the Roman Empire and have another fall? Or do we want to raise above it to where it's not that we get rid of it. We can't get rid of anything in the universe. But you can make it so nonsensical that you wouldn't use that as a form of, collective consciousness. So there's another way. Instead of having necessarily a government, there's more counsel. But I'm not saying from the place we are right now is to get rid of government and go right into counsel. This is going to be a natural progression into a new way of thinking. But we have to start here thinking without disassociating or disassembling the government. So it doesn't mean we go against it. Because if I'm fighting against the government, now I'm in the opposition.
Anything you resist, you will experience.
Yeah, like Fidel Castro tried to free the people of Cuba because of the dictator who ran it prior to him. And he became worse than the old boss. So the new boss is just like the old boss type of thing, thanks to The Who and Teenage Wasteland. Do we want to continue down this road, or we want to jump into a whole different thing? And in order to jump in that whole different thing, you can't say, but we have to get rid of this president and get a new one. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have to get rid of them, but you ease off slowly by realizing they don't have much pull on your life unless you allow it. So a new perspective is you just don't bother with them.
And guys, you'll see these concepts that Frank's talking about right now everywhere. This is what Tony Robbins is talking about. This is what Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is talking about.
In financial aspects,
yeah. Absolutely, but they twist it into a way where like, I get language. It, I see it. It's a different language.
Yeah.
And so when Frank, references this, what he's saying is you can look at anything from this way or that way.
Yeah. And when I meant to say financial, because when people get into a state of financial freedom, which these gentlemen help people do, then it's easier to shift a perspective from that. But you don't necessarily need to become a millionaire to change your perspective. Once they teach you to change your perspective in order to actually know that you already are successful.
That's what they're talking about, though. They're just teaching you how to train the brain.
They're utilizing business or that part as a thing to focus
They show
on.
you are thinking small and you can think big.
Exactly.
And Frank and I are saying
same thing.
You can think big or you don't think at all, which is what we're trying to get you to do, which is you don't need to be tied to thought.
Or let's get out of thinking completely.
That's exactly it, which is no thought. That's where we want you to be, because at that point, you're there. You are completely in flow with the experience. Because what everybody's freaking out about is the world is unfolding, and we're saying it needs to be this way. And if it's not that way as it's happening, we don't like it or we like it. And it's very, very funny because that's like sitting in a movie theater, and as the movie's happening, say, no, it can't happen this way. It was supposed to go like this.
Yeah, you're trying to change it.
And not liking something because it didn't happen the way you pictured it. Yeah. But the same outcome at the end, the underdog comes on top, whatever. These aspects, of daily life, as you're experiencing it, it has unfolded. It has happened.
Yeah.
And so to claw at what if, or this should be, or this could be this way in order for me to feel good, it has to unfold like this, you will never find peace. You're trying to grasp at something that is already unfolded.
And I want to clarify. So if I go to a movie that I don't prefer, I just simply walk out, but I don't sit there all day long and tell my friends not to go see it, because that serves me no purpose.
Or, why did I see that movie? I knew I shouldn't have seen that movie. But these are the things that we hold on to for weeks.
Because I could go into a movie and say I don't prefer that movie, but I don't knock it. Just like if I grab a piece of food and I don't like it, I just simply put it down and don't finish eating it. But I don't knock it because it's not for mine to be taken. But people do that. Like, you get these people like, oh, you don't go see that movie, and they'll tell you all these things, and I go watch the movie. I'm like,
what the hell are they talking?
Or if I'm very influenced, I'll go there. I'm like, yeah, the movie did suck. But inside, I'm like, that was a great movie. Because I don't want to oppose this person because they're attacking.
Then you're playing the game.
Yeah. So there is an understanding, a correlation within the field of preference and non-preference. And the non-preference and preference is something that's built in us. The story me and Mike say that we came here, we signed a soul contract, just like an actor and actress would do moving on to a movie set. There's a character they're going to be playing. There's an understanding. But until they get onto set and interact with the other actors and the director, they don't have the experience yet. They might have read the script, but that doesn't really mean they've experienced it. It's more intellectual understanding. But
you got an idea of it.
So my preference in me is leading me in the direction of why I came here, the role I'm playing. That's all it is. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's just preference, non-preference. So if I'm heading away from the direction, the role I'm supposed to be playing, I'm met up with a non-preference. I let it go, move on. It's like grabbing the wrong script from my co-actor and realize, oh, these aren't my lines. Put it down. Don't knock the lines. These simply just aren't my lines to be spoken. And so at this level that is just slightly above, and then it continues, there is no opposition. There's nothing fighting against. It's all mind. We created the fight. And we bought in. So if it was a government who did it, created this idea of people opposing each other, whether it's white against black, male against female, rich against poor, I don't blame them. I bought into it. I was suckered into it. I don't try to get rid of the devil because the devil is nothing but a concept. So I can't get upset at a concept. I laugh. I'm like, I cannot believe I perform this way because it's the most inefficient thing. Now, to be clear, what me and Mike are talking about when we get into this non-thought, we still work, we still provide, but the thing is, now we have an understanding that
we still pay bills.
We still
do
pay bills.
The normal.
But know this, the universe is now not against us. It's working with us. So when the universe is working with us, I don't come home stressed because I have a bill. I don't come home and yell at my kids because they didn't clean their room. I actually know I'm always being supported, but I just don't know what's supposed to happen. So people are like, oh, I'm being unsupported. I'm like, I don't know enough to know I'm not being supported. And all the times I said I wasn't being supported and I'm not lucky, over time when I started looking at it, and it wasn't like I had to make a complete 180, I started seeing the road ahead of me. I'm like, oh, I really don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But everything is worked out. But what happens if this happens is the only thing I had going for me. And I'm like, has it ever happened? It's like, no. It's like people who talk about...
And I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I know that feeling very well.
It's like people who talk about annihilation. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an interesting concept. But how can you sit here and talk about something that no one's experienced? Because if they did, we wouldn't be able to talk about the word annihilation.
It's all mind. It
is all mind. So instead of talking about annihilation, talk about expansion. Talk about collaboration, not competition, annihilation. We created the opposition. It wasn't...
At least for me, you start to realize, this is all years and years of conditioned ways of thinking, conditioned patterns of thinking in lack, worrying about the future, worrying about providing, worrying about achieving whatever success is, worried about impressing your parents, worried about finding a significant other, worried about having children, all of these things that weigh on us, we can truly let go of.
Yeah. We don't know enough to even worry. The smartest people on the planet come to this conclusion. They study everything, and they realize every time they get to this place, almost like the event horizon, where they think they got it, then it just expands into this black hole. They realize we have no idea. But I like the girth of people that continue to expand and get deeper into science, get deeper into mathematics, get deeper into art, get deeper into philosophy. Because as they get deeper, they may never get to the point of complete empirical understanding or why this happens. But what they do is they connect the dots, and eventually most human beings will see the correlation and they won't have a doubt. Like how many times did somebody have to see an airplane fly before we realized airplanes can fly? Right? When the Wright brothers started, what was that, 1902 or something?
Yeah, a while ago.
There. So they might have heard, like, oh, I got to see this for myself. And there were people like, that's bullshit, they can't fly. And all of a sudden,
of course,
as you think about, like, what was the availability for the average human being to actually see an airplane fly? But now you look up in the sky, so there's no doubt.
Yeah, now we have Bezos in space.
Yeah. So, but I'm using that as an example. So the concepts we're talking about right now, as we let go and just open up, because the past tells us we didn't know. Because everything that people oppose. Now, I'm not saying your individual life should not be strung along by somebody else. Your excitement will lead you to the books, the studies, or the avenue in which you're supposed to travel. Do not be diverted by somebody else. Everyone thinks I need you on my side of the boat for me to be successful. I'm like, no. Mingle throughout the boat. That's what the boat's made for. If I get everyone on my side of the boat's going to tip. That's going to help me out. But I have my vision. Mike has his vision. And everyone else has a vision. I am not talking anyone into my vision. I'm just teaching myself, as I teach it to others, the concepts and the principles. When you follow them, you will find your path. You're always on your path, but you now become understanding how your path works. And preference and non-preference.
You're not fighting the path anymore.
No, you're going with it. And know this, the universe and the world and the people next to you are collaborative. But if you look at the person next to you's opposition and you throw the first punch, they're not going to be helping you out so much.
I do want to say this because I, often would remind myself of this when I first started, getting into these concepts. You are not doing anything wrong. In fact, you're learning exactly where you're supposed to be.
This is how we learn.
Oh, but I mean, we have this weird. Actually, I know why. It's a conditioning from society, movies, especially schooling. we don't want to get the answer wrong. We were taught, we were graded, we failed. How my child doesn't get Fs, my child doesn't fail.
But even the school system didn't know.
No.
So it wasn't like.
But I'm telling people why we have this weird obsession with failure and these ideas, and it comes from a very low level of.
It's the base level of mankind. Yeah.
But constant conditioning over years, so you have to see that from above to go, because then you allow yourself to start to let go of the grip. Yeah. Because you realize, my whole life I have been saying I'm not good enough. I'm not achieving as much as I should. And it's like, whoa. You're exactly where you need to be. There is nothing that you have done wrong.
Yeah, and obviously if you're actually listening to this podcast or some before, you're already inquisitive into these principles already. And that's what it is. The cool thing about this avenue which me and Mike are up against or in is we're not here to preach to anybody, but if you're listening, you're choosing to listen.
And we thank you for that.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
You're here like us. We're trying to learn and describe this undescribable space.
Yeah, I'll get concepts in my head like I did earlier this week, and now I'm just going to exercise them by talking about them.
Yep.
And I don't know. But there are things that I do know, this correlation. So when I study all these avenues of different ways of talking, I see the connection, and the connection never fails me. But the cool thing is I find different people or different ways of talking about it, and that's what makes me excited. And the greater we get involved in, the deeper a biologist gets into biology, the deeper a quantum physicist gets into quantum physics. It just it makes it more legitimate in the understanding of what we're doing here. We're all in this field collaborating, not to be in opposition. Opposition it's a very funny thing that we created. But if you get into collaboration, you take out the middleman, because we know middleman is the most efficient person because they create their own job. But in a field of opposition, you have a middleman. And the middleman slows everything down because everything has to go through the middleman. So why do I have to ask my government if it's okay for me to do X, Y, Z? We give them that power. They don't. People are like, the government's taking our power away. I'm like, no, you're giving it away. I don't need to get rid of the government just to rise above and do that. I don't even knock them. That's their job. Their job is to do that. The job of the car salesman is to sell a car, but if you can go to the bike shop and get a bike. You don't need a car. You can walk. You can get an airplane. You don't have to get sucked into buying a car or a particular car. It's a choice. But their job is to sell the car, and I'm not going to get rid of their job. Can you imagine I spent my whole time on, I got into the Senate, and I'm like, I'm going to pass bills on everything I didn't like that was done to me?
You'd be a great politician.
No, that's what politicians do.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah,
it's insane. But what's funny is, why is that person going after that? I'm like, well, if I could interview them, I'd find out at some point in their life this happened to them, and they're going to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else. So at some level, it's a justified and righteous thing to do, but it's not the way to go about it. It doesn't work.
And
how many laws do we have?
And
it's just ridiculous.
Well, that and life works itself out. So the more I struggle to try to do something,
life works itself out when you get to the point where you raise above seeing it.
It takes so much longer to accomplish what you want when you're trying to do it down here in the mud.
If you want to stop getting tackled, step off the football field.
Yeah.
Simply. Get into the bleachers and you won't get tackled.
And how can you do that the quickest? In silence.
That's one way.
You know? But I mean, the quickest way for me, whenever I'm I find myself getting very wrapped up in the person and in this, illusion that we call reality, is I go back to the silence, because it's in that space that you realize I am the awareness. I am not the person I am not the feeling of pain. I'm not the feeling of stress. I'm not the feeling of anxiety. I am the witness to that. Yeah. And that's what Frank and I are talking about, that silence.
Yeah.
And when you get to this space, this silence, you start to see that everything around you loosens up. And this is where you realize the control that we have over what's going on and what we're experiencing. Yeah. It's honestly, you're living your like emotions, and you're living your feelings, and you're living what you focus on. And so as you begin to let go and relax and unwind, you naturally draw preferential experiences towards you. You naturally draw things you would qualify as preferential or good, you know?
Yeah, but you have to...
On these lower levels.
Yeah, when you drop the insistence of it having to be this way.
Yeah, that and the like and dislike.
Because people still think...
When something you don't have to like...
This is how my preference ought to look. I'm like, no, we don't know because you've never been there. So we have to resist having it to turn out this way. Because if you want something new, a new preferential, you've never been there, so you don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
Just like I don't want to know how the movie, when I go to see 007, I don't want to know how it's going to turn out. I know what I'm watching. I know the theme. I know it's a James Bond. I know the actor that's playing James Bond. And I'm excited about doing it, but I don't want to know about it until I'm sitting in the theater and watch it in the moment unfold. This is how life is. So when you watch a movie, you're participating by observing without any, opposition to the movie and any judgment to it. But the more judgment you have it, the more you're going to hate it. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I don't like the way. Oh, I think he's too old. It's like, shut up. Just watch the movie. Yeah. Or just simply don't go. Again, I'm a James Bond fan, so it would be irresponsible for me to go there for my personal self, to go there with a certain idea of what's supposed to happen, because it's going to ruin it for me. Now, if James Bond is in your theme, it's your non-preference, so you have no right to talk about it. You just get the hell out of here. Yeah.
Right?
Go James Bond.
I think
do you know why we like James Bond?
Huh.
The reason we like James Bond is because whether he's sitting at a bar drinking a martini, or he's in a tight situation where there's a gun to his head, he maintains the same disposition. He really does.
Always keeps his cool.
He keeps his cool. Now, there's definitely this, when he has a gun to his head, his response to it is different than the martini and the blonde or the brunette or the redhead, whoever it might be in this. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I didn't see the movie yet. Is sitting next to him. But even having a redhead next to you might be a problem, too. It's a fun problem, though. I'm just joking, Karen.
I was waiting for that. Yeah. I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm freaking going the hell on that way. Can we rewind this and edit this part out? Tiptoe.
Sorry, we're live,
it's
man.
It's out. Jesus.
We're live. Yeah. That's the point of this.
Yeah, we don't edit.
Every mishap, edit, whatever. No, this is Frank and I just talking.
Yep, and that's the problem.
That's good. Yeah. No, I like that.
Yeah.
One thing I've heard about, you brought up that thing that people were talking about, like essentially communication. I heard somebody say that communication is to commune, like union.
Yeah.
And to speak, that's how we, converse and get our feelings across. And that's what Frank and I are doing when we sit down here every Wednesday, is we're trying to describe this formless space, not found in time, not found in space, this awareness that you can rest in. This is what we're talking about and trying to describe.
Yeah, me and Mike talk about the same thing from different degrees.
Yeah.
But we're not opposing each other. We're actually supporting each other.
Oh.
Yeah, completely.
This whole experience is all supporting what we're talking about.
Yeah. We fight it out afterwards, though.
Duke it out.
With the camera's off. Yeah, but, so, hey.
What's up?
Did you want to?
Let's dive into Kayla's question.
All right.
So, guys, we've got...
we got a shout out from Kayla?
Yes, shout out to Kayla.
Hey, Kayla.
Kayla works behind the scenes with us here at Perspective Shift, helping us get the show together,
if it wasn't for Kayla, we'd just be two idiots sitting at a table.
That's true.
With a candle.
That's true.
What's with the candle?
So, hey, I love it.
Yeah.
So she sends me a message. She's like, hey, I want to get a question out there. in this week's episode, and I said, of course, shoot it over. So I figured I'd read this, and Frank and I could dive into this one for tonight.
Yeah.
So the question is about control. What are you in control of, and what are you not in control of? Some people say that there's a divine plan where nothing is in our control, and others say that we are in control of the timing and manifesting of everything around us because we are technically God in a human body. So there's a lot to digest in this. I'm going to read it again after I finish this, and we'll take it kind of piece by piece. But I know that both are true in different ways.
Well,
Let's go over.
Yeah, so to give a quick answer, then we're going to dive into it.
Let me read it back one more time.
All right.
Okay, so question is about control. What are you in control of, and what are you not in control of? Some people say that there's a divine plan where nothing is in our control, and others say that we are in control of everything, the timing, the manifesting, everything around us because we are technically God in a human body.
Okay. Now, I'm going to start off by saying it's the same degree. The question, so it's this and that. So the question comes from a different pole on each side of the thing, but it's just the question is a different degree of the same answer we're going to give. So depending on how you look at it, we have control over our perception to what's happening. The world's coming at us. In the paradox of that, because we have control of perception, our perception then proceeds out into the physical world, and then we are actually brushing the strokes on the canvas in which we call the physical world. It's this and that. So it's how you're looking at it. So some people will think those are opposing questions. They're not. They're supportive questions. So first, if you feel that your life is out of control and you have no control, we'll go into the world of perspective onto, okay, this thing happened to me. Rather than blaming, I'm in control of this, I created this because I am God. And why would I do this to myself? Well, for one, there's a part of us that is connected to God, but there's a part of us that's having an experience that can be disconnected or muffled out. We're never really disconnected from source, but we can drown out the noise and not get the information. Just like a cell phone is
constant stimulation.
Yeah, exactly. Just like a cell phone is always on, but if I'm driving through the mountains and the cell tower is out of distance, all of a sudden if I'm on the phone with somebody, it cuts out. But my cell phone didn't turn off. It's just the connection got displaced for the moment. So if I'm in that position, if I'm in that pole of the question, if I change my perspective to what's happening, or even to what happened if you want to go that far, and I look at it differently, I literally change the history of what happened. And that's when I become in control of creating the outside world like we would think as we are gods. So they're the same. It's just which direction you're looking from it. Right? If I'm here looking at the hub, from here, it's different degrees of the same thing.
So
is that clear? I don't.
Yeah. So I mean, like when I read that, this is a question that me personally, I went back and forth with internally like a lot.
Oh, you can say this could be a 2-hour, 3-hour conversation.
Exactly. Just this one statement of, is there a divine plan? If you is there a divine plan, or are you in control? So, for me, when I began to learn these concepts, I fell in love with the idea where I saw that I was in control with the emotion, with the experience, with everything. And it was very much so for me a stance where I was like, okay, I'm personally in control of what I'm experiencing. And in fact, I did not like the idea that there was a divine plan. I did not like thinking that things would just fall into place, and I didn't have a sense of control over that. Where I'm at today in my life, I would say there is a divine plan. We are playing out an experience. Like Frank was saying, our perception to what we're experiencing is our sense of control.
But as our perception also it adds upon to the plan.
Oh, absolutely.
So even as I change, even the movie will change along with it, even different than what the director output it if I change the way I play my. So we are both in control on both sides of it. It's just how you're looking at it.
I guess though, what I'm getting at is, I realized for me personally, it was a very ego-driven experience for me to state I am in control. In fact, it was me trying to experience this silence, experience this this being within a person. And, okay, I just found the key to achieving everything I want on a very material level. And there is so much more than that. And in all honesty, there is a greater plan playing out. And when I allow myself to observe that, I realize how not in control I am. And so that's why this question is kind of funky, is if you think... So I want people to know you are God. I will stand by that statement. You are God. And again, the way people hear this, and depending on what level you're at, it will come through in different ways. But you are the silence. You are the awareness. When you say a prayer, who is witnessing that prayer? It is you. Who is talking? Who is witnessing the person talking to you? That is God. That is the awareness. That's what I'm talking about when I say you are God. I am not saying that you can control every moment in your life like you're wanting to, because that's how the person thinks. That's how the human thinks. This must unfold like that in order for me to be happy or to experience what I call grace or whatever. It's, again, a very conditioned, ego-driven way to think. But I also didn't like feeling trapped. Yeah. I was also like, this is why I'm saying I struggled a lot with this, guys. Like, I felt trapped. I was like, wait, so you're telling me that everything is just kind of planned out? So my choices, and it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying.
The story's not done.
Exactly. There are, it's kind of like this, like, would you ever manifest, one of your parents dying, one of your siblings dying, a friend passing? No, of course not. But these things will come up. Yeah. And there's bigger lessons that will unfold around us that are meant to make us elevate and grow even more as a spirit and become more and more one. And to say that you created that from that ego stance or you manifested that is simply not true.
Yeah. Well...
You did not manifest your brother passing. You know what I mean?
No. But I am not my brother.
Of course. So, but you see what I mean, though?
Yeah, so I'm going to simplify this in a way, but I'm just going to use this as an analogy. So picture yourself playing a video game or you're interacting with a video game. So God would be the person who wrote the format of the code of the game, but they don't tell you how to play it. And even the person who wrote the game will find that some 12-year-old kid broke through a wall that they might have been aware of, but they didn't understand because they found these principles. Or they're playing the game in which they realize, it was never intended for that. So God lays out these principles and laws, but it's still the free will to change the story or alter the story. But if I say I want it to happen this way, all I'm doing is replaying the story on a loop, and that's boring. Because when I go to see James Bond, the new version, the latest version, yes, I'm aware of the characters. I'm aware of the premise of what's going to happen. But I don't know the storylines. I don't know the output, nor do I want to. So no one wants to live a life that they want to control it.
We think we do when we're at that level.
Base level, yeah.
We do. Because I remember going through that.
Yeah. Because I had experience, it turned out good. But why did the experience turn out good? Because you didn't know it was going to happen. That's why it turned out good.
True.
Yeah. And you were open to it. So
it was a knowing. It was a trusting.
That's why when we were younger, we're typically open until we're taught to be closed. That's why most of our childhood, depending where you grew up, was supreme. Then we started getting a little bit older, and we started learning things from our elders, like you ought not to do this, you should do this. If this happens, no good. Make sure you do this. And all of a sudden, we start to close down and get very rigid. All right? So from that point, we want to become more malleable and more open. Now, if you became real rigid, I suggest you start to open up slowly. Don't jump in and be naive in this world. So when Mike says we are all gods, yeah, a part of us is God, but also to try to take that in and not reject it. Because a piece of us is God, but we're also here in this physical world. And in order for me to be physical, this frequency has to be at a lower density. So this physical me is limited to what actual God can do. So I am a part of God, but my physical body is very limited in that. But guess what? With all the limitations I have is where the infinite possibilities arise.
See, but God is not the control of everything. And I feel like that's how people are look at God.
God,
like a controller of
all.
all.
The way I look at God, God is encumbrance in everything, but has no opinion onto it. Just like
exactly, it is a free form working in tandem.
But there are these principles and rules. If you go against them, there'll be consequences. So this is how we came up with it. So a lot of it that we talk about isn't malarkey. I think where a lot of the malarkey comes from is not what we were talking about or where religion comes in. It's the doctrines on how to get there. Now, someone might have done this, A, B, and C, D, and life worked out for them. So what they did is they reverse engineer it and said, everyone in my religion must do this. But it doesn't work out that way for everybody else. So what do I say as the head of my religion? You must be doing it wrong. No. What I did to get to this place, I did in that moment, but I didn't plan it out. It just so happened it turned out that way. And because I have a thing called a memory, I reverse engineer it and says, this happened because of this. That isn't the empirical causation. There are correlations, though. I'm not denying the correlations of this and this and this and ending up with this. But if I do this and Mike does this, we're going to get different results. They might be very similar, but they're going to be different. So we are in this confined of a limitation. But like I said a couple of podcasts before, if you didn't have a limitation of a football field 100 yards by 50 yards, you couldn't play unlimited games. But if you had an unlimited field, there is no game to be had. It's gone.
Chaos.
Well, it just gets washed away. Where does somebody just scream?
Yeah, there's nothing to be held together, if you will.
There's no boundaries. And boundaries create the idea in the physical world in which we're in, the infinite possibilities that could be done. And we see it. Like you go back to look and just whether it's art, music, the physical or the athlete. You go back, say, 100 years and what the athlete was doing then. You look at the athlete now. They're superior, but they're not better because what's the athlete going to look like 100 years from now? So it's this expansion. So because if we dwell in the past, like, oh, I'm better. Well, if you're better, then your 100-year you or somebody else in the future is going to be better. But the present moment offers everything. And when we're actually in the present moment silent, that's when we are God. But when we come out of silence into the world, we slip away from that.
We're then the person, the separate.
Yeah. So in this world we're living in, when we utilize spirit and physicality, materialistic, equally, we have this amazing ride. It's a balance. So sometimes you're in the viewpoint of the spirit looking into the material, and then you're on the material side looking into spirit, and it becomes this balancing point. But if you're all spirit, say it's like a seesaw, boom, there's no movement. If I'm more material, boom. Material comes from spirit, and if spirit has nothing to produce, what good is it? So the spirit is here to create material to enjoy, but material is always fleeting. But it doesn't matter because spirit can continue to make another hamburger or hot dog.
I guess
a Twinkie.
One thing I want to go into about this question, a lot of these new age people out there are teaching this very, idea of you are creating everything. You are manifesting your reality. There is a lot of truth to what they're saying. And Frank and I know this, we can generate certain experiences by what we focus on and what we experience. But if that's your only method of practice, when something does not go your way,
you did something wrong.
Yep. Now the whole practice is thrown off. Wait, I didn't manifest that. Oh, wait, did I? And then you're going back and forth. Then you're caught in mind. Because it's all mind.
Yeah, innately we don't.
All mind.
Yeah, innately we don't want to blame ourselves for the things that happen. So, like I mentioned in the last podcast, once I started conceptually understanding these principles and laws that govern this universe, and then I actually started exercising them. So in the past, prior to understanding them, I was unlucky and lucky. But then when I actually knew them, I was focused and I was focused and distracted. So I replaced unlucky with distraction, and I replaced focus with lucky. I am in control, and so when I get distracted, it's on me. But I don't beat myself up. I kind of laugh at it because it's part of the game. But the more I put myself out on the line, the less I can get distracted. So the higher up I go on the tightrope, I really better be focused or it's the end of me. So the higher you go, the easier it is to focus. If I'm doing 100 miles an hour in my car, you bet it's easier for me to look at the windshield than it is just to gaze over to the side of me or to this side of me. But if I'm doing 5 miles an hour, this is why most people get into accidents half a mile from their house, because they're doing 20 miles an hour as they pull into the neighborhood and they're looking down at their phone. No one's looking at their phone when they're doing 100 miles an hour on the freeway. Trust me. It's easy to focus when you're at a higher level. So when we get to these levels that me and Mike are talking about, focus is easier. But you still once in a while can get distracted. But when I get distracted, you know what I do? I step on the gas. And I go faster. Why? Because that's going to keep me focused. This is a natural progression into the field of what we call expansion. So I have control over perception, moving in the direction in which I want, which is preferential. I could also go in the non-preferential. But in the physical world, we're not in control of what happens, but we also step into the spirit world where we're projecting in our imagination to what ought to happen, but it doesn't always turn out the way because when we experience it, we're no longer in the spirit world and we're tied in.
It's funny. I like how you're explaining it because you're right. You can look at it as the person, or you can look at this as the self,
but you can't do
capital S, the awareness.
Yeah.
And depending on which way you're looking at it, it can be either.
I can only look west or east independently, but I can't do it at the same time.
Well, it's just funny.
But that's the seesaw is either here or here. It can't be both up at the same time. So you have to accept that sometimes I'm in the spirit and sometimes I'm in the physical. That's okay. Mm-hmm. So when I'm in the physical, I'm not really God. But when I'm in the spirit, I'm God. But now God, as my God, I want to get back into the physical and experience that, right? Oh, I manifested Karen. I said
there you go.
And now I want to go and experience it, Experience it. Karen is not it, by the way. I get a lot. I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut tonight. It's not working out for me.
One of those nights.
Yeah, it's one of those nights.
I'm glad that you brought it up from that point, because from where these questions come up, you're gonna find different answers. If this question is coming up, why in the self, it to me very different than if this question is coming up within the person, because when you're asking yourself something other than who is this thought arising to? Who is the person having this thought? You get trapped into this very separate thinking. And when we think we're separate from all this around us, that's the person, you know. You've got likes, you've got dislikes, you have preference, you know, and there is a level above that. There's multitudes of levels above that. And it is in no thought. It is in the silence that you're going to experience God. Yeah. It is in the silence that you experience truly who you are.
Yeah.
I in the silence is what we are. And it's not something physical. It's not something that you can describe and pinpoint. It's simply an awareness. And that's what we're getting at. And so as things unfold, for you to think that you need to have a control on them is thinking in the person. As it unfolds, good, bad, who knows? We don't know.
Yeah.
We just know it's happening exactly as it should.
Yeah. Because we can feel it. Yeah. So to summarize the question, they're both true, depends which way you're looking at it. So they're not...
And from where you're looking
those
at it.
Questions, or the way it's asked, they're not in opposition. They're in different degrees of the question. And so at the different level, there isn't any opposition to them. It's how you look at it. And that's really what we're coming down to. And obviously, Kayla understood that to a certain level to even oppose these questions, or actually to ask these questions.
Absolutely.
So thanks for those questions.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so it is interesting because we get to that another level, we start to realize
it's all mind.
It is all mind, but now you go in from what I call the base level is called survival, and then as we step into this next level, it's actually what we call creative, which within creative you actually collaborate with everything and everyone around you. You don't start to look at things like, oh my God, this is wrong. You actually interact with it, and in the interaction with a person, an animal, the woods, whatever it is, nature, it starts to deliver to you while you're here, and you start to see these synchronistic avenues. And what is synchronicity? Synchronicity is telling us there is an order here. Even though there is a divine,
you're playing a part.
There's a divine, there's a divine order, and it's unfolding, and we get these little signposts. So synchronicity is like, if I'm heading towards the beach and I'm uncertain if I'm going towards the beach, and there I see a sign that says the beach with an arrow, even though I'm not at the beach yet, even though I'm not at the beach. Yeah, I want to go to the beach.
That's funny.
But you see a sign that says beach, and the arrow's pointed in the direction which you're moving. I'm not at the beach yet, but it's an indication that I'm moving in the right direction.
And when Frank says the beach, guys, what we're talking about is you want to start a business, right?
Oh, I'm talking about the beach.
And then,
right? Yeah, that's all I care about.
You want to start a business, right? Okay, so you're saying, okay, I got to do this, and I got to meet these people, and you start doing this. And then all of a sudden, you're talking about this with your buddy at the coffee shop, and somebody overhears you and says, hey, funny you bring this up. Yeah. My uncle works in said business. Would you like his contact information? Yeah. And you're like, oh, and it's that next step. That's a synchronicity. It's when you start to create this open space, the universe allows for different, or I shouldn't say allows, the universe has different opportunities unfold in ways we could never fathom. And so the control is your focus on, said goal, said business, and knowing, hey, I'm going to get there, but allowing the world to unfold exactly as it should.
And talk about synchronicity. I'm going to tell you a story about what happened to me and Mike this morning. So I go to call Mike to ask him to bring something over when he came to the podcast. And I go to call him, and he was busy, so he texted me, hey, I'll call you soon. So in the interim of me waiting for calling, I was listening to an old lecture from Terence McKenna. And what's funny is Terence McKenna started talking about the same thing we're talking about differently, but he was talking about the understanding of we aren't in control and we don't know what's going to happen. And he goes in, so worrying is the most ridiculous thing you can do, but we can perceive what's to unfold in front of us. And in the act of perceiving, we then have control over the output and the input. And then next thing you know, Mike calls me and hits me with this question.
See,
and I'm like, if that's synchronicity, come on.
And that's so funny. And I love that Terrence said that, because that's it. To think that we have control, guys, is such an ego-driven idea.
The control we have is the perception onto it. And when we actually control our perception, we then have control on what happens in the outside world.
But to say I'm controlling everything that's going on right now because I'm manifesting it, that's quite the statement,
Yeah.
Yes, you're experiencing all of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, but to say I'm in...
Well, the thing is the corporeal me has the ability to perceive it. So in other words, but within the spirit world, you're actually putting the image out onto the physical world in order for the corporeal to experience. So you're actually doing both. It's who am I talking? So when I'm here talking, I'm in the corporeal stuff. So in other words, the practice in which I practice, such as meditation and mindfulness and quiet the mind, I'm not doing when I'm having this conversation.
No.
Because I can't be explaining and practicing at the same time, and I'm aware of that. So when I'm talking about it, this intellectual me is as intellectual as I could possibly get, which is not that far up the scale, but
I think you're more than intellectually.
Well, thank you, Mike. But anyway, but I'm not here to compare my intellect to somebody else's. It's different. But when I'm meditating, I'm in a completely different place. But right now, I'm cohabitating or coexisting with the physical world. So I'm not really doing my practice. I'm explaining and talking. I'm actually experiencing in the world. And I have fun with that. And then I have fun going into the other realm where I'm actually in my practice. Again, I can't be heading west and east at the same time. And I'm okay with that.
Well, what's
okay
so funny
that,
at the same time, though, right now, looking at you, just our eyes communicating.
Yeah.
There is no thought going on in your head right now. There is no, I must say this, I must do that. When Frank and I sit in front of these microphones, it's a detachment. And what's flowing through us right now is what we're feeling, what we're experiencing.
Because we're probably at a low beta rate. So
brainwave wise?
Yeah. But yet the state I'm talking about is
theta.
We go into the theta. So right now, in order to have this conversation stuff, I have to step out of theta because so when I go into meditation, I go into theta. So I'm pulling and drawing from what we call the infinite or the universal source or God or whatever it is, information which we are part of. But when I'm talking, I'm using the information that I pulled into the meditation, so to speak, into this. But I can't be necessarily meditating and practicing and doing it at the same time. And this is what we call channeling. Some people use the word channeling where they're interacting, but they would have a different experience if they weren't interacting with other people. Mm-hmm. It's a very fine line. So it's very difficult. That's why it's this and that, not this or that. So I don't know if the question by Kayla was asked, is it this or that? I think that's how she asked it.
Yes and no.
Yeah. So
she left it pretty broad.
Yeah, so it is this and that. So it's
like
both.
Anything in life. I don't think there is nothing I can think of that's just this or that.
Well,
there's no thought.
If you fall,
or thought.
If we fall into the field of like what we call survival, it seems like it's this or that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's so when you're
a good point.
When you're on the football field, you're gonna get tackled. That's part of the game. But if you're tired of getting tackled, there's a whole nother level of sporting. And it's not to say, and I'm just using football as an example. I can use any sport, and I'm not taking it from and demeaning it at all. It's not what I'm doing, because the level of creative opposed to or different than, because the different poles of the level of survival are just different. One isn't better than the other. You're going to offer different experience, but there's natural progression, because history that we know of is the history of survival.
Well, it's funny.
And we already know that story. It's getting old.
It's funny, though. So in business, and I experienced this with my business, I see, to some people, $10,000 in a month is a lot of money, where to some people,
that's chump change.
$10,000 in a month is a horrible month. And I can see this, and it's has nothing to do with anything but your level of thinking and thought.
Yeah.
And you start to kind of see, like, wow, these same what we're stressing over on this level is the same thing at a different level.
Well, or because when you say $10,000 is chump change and $10,000 lot, that's the same level.
Yeah.
But when you get to the level what me and Mike are talking about, it's like, who cares?
Well, that's the thing.
It doesn't really matter. It doesn't mean you don't disassociate the 10 grand, because what I mean is the $10,000 comes to me in direct relationship if I need it or not. Most people sit there and count their money in survival and never spend the thing. They never spend the object in what we call dollars. They literally die with all this money. And what was the purpose for it? It goes back to the story in the Old Testament with the king that had his, I don't know the names of any of the characters. I can never remember. There's too many damn names in the Old Testament anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure people out there know the names. And so the king had 3 servants, and he gave them all endowment. He gave them all money and sent them out into the world. And one invested in this one, and when they came back, he says, my master, I invested in this, oh good. And the other one said, I invested in this, oh good. And the other one says, I went and buried the money so it wouldn't disappear. And that person was scolded by the master. Where the person thought they were doing good by not spending it, because if I don't spend it, I can't lose it. But the energy of money is meant to invest, not to
save.
To save. Because why would you have it? It's like having food in front of you and starving because you don't want the food to disappear. That's the mind that no more food will come, no more money will come. So that's what money is for in how we look at it. So if you're not investing it, you're wasting it. So in survival mode, people, they don't invest it, and they're always in survival mode.
I also want to touch on that. So,
but if 10 grand comes my way opposed to 50 grand that month, it means that's all I needed.
It's just funny because we think that those are different levels, and what I'm trying to say is they're not.
No.
10,000, 50,000, 100,000.
Well, at the level we're talking about, but at the survival level, it is.
Yeah.
But they're the same thing. Now you're worried. You're worried in different directions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You start qualifying.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, exactly. You justify it. But there's no opposition empirically. We create opposition at these lower levels. And why do we do it? It's kind of like the idea of falling from grace, the concept from it. It goes back to the Garden of Eden when they ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. As good and evil, in that case, are opposing each other. But you can look at it, it's preference, non-preference. Preference and non-preference don't oppose each other. Broccoli doesn't oppose pizza. Some people put broccoli on their pizza. I do not. But it doesn't oppose it. I don't need to get rid of broccoli in order to enjoy my pizza at a better rate. But if you're in the survival mode, you think you need to get rid of broccoli. And guess what happens? You're over at the broccoli farm. I can't even say the word broccoli. Jesus. So you're over at the broccoli farmer trying to get rid of it while your pizza's going sour. Just eat your damn pizza. Leave the broccoli alone because someone likes broccoli. Actually, do you ever have broccoli crust?
No.
Pizza? Oh, it's pretty good.
But I actually have, now that you said that, I've had broccoli on pizza before. It was like that white pizza.
Yeah.
Put like broccoli in it and stuff.
Yeah, I like broccoli, but it's too cumbersome to have on pizza. It's just ridiculous.
No, I know.
Next thing you're going to put donuts on broccoli. I'm like, come on. I mean, donuts on pizza. It's
put anything on
it's pizza. Idea. Yeah. But, like, here we go. We're digressing into pizza now.
It just shows you the mind, the attention span of the mind.
Yeah, especially
you know?
mine. I'm like, Phew.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Squirrel.
That's the thing. Like,
that's the fun of life, though.
Yeah, this thing, you're trying to Say, this is me. This is me. This is who I am.
Yeah.
Let go of all that.
And there was a point especially when I started conceptualizing and intellectualizing these principles before I was really practicing them, I would get mad at myself getting distracted.
Well, yeah, because
now distraction is my best friend.
You were taught failure was wrong from growing up. So you said, I failed. I got to punish myself.
Like, no, I just learned something.
That's such a ridiculous idea. Wait,
and
I do it differently now.
These concepts, all right.
I move now. I that will put me back on the path.
Like I was talking to somebody the other day, and it was a young person. They were 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
And somehow we got into this conversation, and I was rattling on. And it was interesting because they're like, oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God. I've learned more in 20 minutes talking to you than I did in all of my high school years. And I said, no, you didn't learn anything. You're remembering. Because if I was teaching you something that was profound, you wouldn't have no idea what I'm talking about. You just simply are remembering what you already knew. And what it is we have built in us the sequence of information that's coded in our DNA, and we trigger a frequency. And how do we get to that frequency? By raising, is open up. Once I know something, I shut the chambers of the door or the box in which I'm in, and I actually imprison myself. But when I know nothing, I'm open, and all the doors in the jailhouse free all the prisoners to go to different levels and learn different things. So when I get into this state, I go to higher levels, a new understanding of everything comes to me, but it never ends. And that's why I know nothing. But this person, I'm like, you're just remembering. And at some level, I'm just a concept to you, and you're talking to yourself. You're using a permission slip and using me because you already knew this coming into this world. You're just discovering as we speak. And this is only the first. I only had this conversation with this person for 20 minutes.
I really like that, though, Frank, because we're
remembering.
We're all.
This is why we mentioned it. The reason
we just want you to remember who you are.
And I'm remembering, like having this conversation with Mike every Wednesday makes me remember because it triggers some frequency in me, which comes from spirit, into the physicality, which opens up my DNA and new information comes in. And this is what I believe what was meant with said, the embodiment of Christ is in every one of us. It's a DNA. A DNA is packed with information. But in order to get the information, you must open the book. You can go into a library, but once I need to walk over the shelf, open it, and actually read the text in order for the information to come into me. The DNA is the book. And then we go into it. And how do we do it? We rise our frequency, and that's literally pulling the book from the shelf, opening up. And we open up the DNA, it reveals something. And it was like, holy cow, I'm remembering. It's like Alan Watts once said, we came here playing a hide and go seek, and now we're finally finding ourselves. And it's endless. And when I understand that, there's no opposition in that. There's just collaboration and expansion, and the universe is here to support us. If I'm open to reading that book that I'm interested in reading, metaphorically and reality, it will lead me down the road in which I'm heading. But I don't say, where is that book going to get me? That's absurd now. In survival mode, I want to be like, I got to save my energy. So how is that book going to get me there? I'm like, you got to read it. Well, I'm not going to read it till I know how it's going to get me to where I need to go. And I'm like, you'll never get there. You'll never get there.
Well, and do you think there's somewhere you have to be?
Yeah, that too. But when I'm compelled, and when I say compelled, when I'm drawn to reading a book, I read it because that excitement in me is the God in me saying, please read this book. It will help you further along the road. But if you don't read it, I'm not going to scold you. There'll be another book, excitement after excitement. Because even though I missed that ship, there's a ship leaving the harbor every second of every day, of every moment of every day. Don't Oh,
In
what's
fact,
going
it's
on?
happening right now.
Well,
And
10
now.
years ago, I missed the ship, and I can't. I'm like, there's another ship. There's another ship.
We just
there's
had a
another
ship.
Yep, there's a ship. So, and that's what perspective shift's all about, is understanding it. In this moment right now, when you get excited, so how do I know that? When you get excited about something, follow that thread. That is your journey. But when you turn on TV and the infomercial guy is saying, you need to do this. No, that's not your journey unless you're excited for doing it. So I don't knock the guy doing it, but don't feel bad if you're not excited. That's the survival in us. Why, I don't want to do this. I must be doing something wrong. No, you're not. That's not your journey. Go to the next channel. The next infomercial guy might be yours.
What kind of stops us from doing that is when we do get that feeling of what we're drawn to, we allow the personhood, the mind to come in and say, oh, well, that won't work. We'll say, oh, this is what I'm drawn to, like art, whatever, my passion. And we think, oh, because if I go into that, I won't have enough money, and then I won't be able to support my kids, rather than going into that, allowing whatever experience to unfold, and that you'll run into that person who says, hey, this is what I started doing, or you'll sell that piece of art to their neighbor who happens to be,
not even that.
An art collector.
Yeah.
You're thinking about how it needs to happen. That's what Frank and I are saying. Follow that passion.
And it will be supported.
It will unfold into something. The same thing, people are worried about their job. Like, what job do I need to have? It doesn't matter. And go into work holding these feelings of knowing somebody will walk into your life, or as soon as you leave work, you're going to bump into somebody and you will start talking. It doesn't matter. It will happen.
It will. And it does. It always has. It sneaks
but
up
you
on
see
us.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, we're like, all right, we get excited, and then we say,
that's the
they only make $35,000.
That's the thing in mind.
They only get this.
Yeah,
that would never work for my lifestyle.
But now we live in a world, which is nice. We live in a world where whether you're an artist or a lawyer or whatever it is, there are artists making more money than lawyers. Right? And again, there are also lawyers making more money than artists. And what it is, I'm not knocking a lawyer, but if you're drawn to be a lawyer, excited to be a lawyer, become a lawyer.
Absolutely.
But if you're becoming a lawyer because most lawyers make a lot of money, that money is going to drown you, and you're going to need that money for illness treatments. Mm-hmm. All right? We know that. The same thing is, if I say, "Oh, I like the way the artist is," and if you're not an artist, you're going to go down that road and you're going to suffer for it because you're like, I watched a documentary on these artists and I want to be them. I'm like, you might like the passion they're drawing, because I love artists, and to some degree we're all artists, but what medium of art am I doing? Because a lawyer is an artist, just like a painter is an artist.
Well, you're an artist, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. But so I could watch any documentary on any human excelling within the field in which they're drawn to, and I draw from that. But it's not that I want to do what they're doing. It's never what one does. It's how they feel about what does. So in the physical world, when we're too attached to the physical world and not enough spirit, we think the causation is the doing.
It's very common. Well, we're taught that from an early age.
In the spirit world...
What did you do to feel happy?
Yeah, in the spirit world, it's all about feeling. But when you actually feel and generate an energy field, you're going to do. So there is a correlation with doing, but it's not the causation. And the true causation in the feeling, why does that occur? I have no idea. I don't know why God or whoever developed this program did that. But I like the way it feels. And when an emotion comes in, I don't like the way it feels, it means I need to alter my perception in the moment. It doesn't mean anything other than that to me. So now my emotions are guidance systems. So if I feel good, keep going. If I don't feel good, make a U-turn, baby. Mm-hmm. That's it. I don't question it. Where did I go wrong?
I do want to say this because this is important. Feeling uncomfortable is not I'm going in the wrong direction.
No.
Because some people will say...
It's breaking through your belief structure. Yeah,
because this is where people get stuck. They say, oh, because I'm going to be uncomfortable, that's an unknown for me.
If you're too comfortable, it's nothing new.
And what Frank's saying, though, is he's not saying comfortable at that. He's talking about the way it feels. Are you getting that energy? Do you have that feeling? Does it generate inspiration?
Comfort sitting on the couch eating ice cream.
Exactly.
Excitement
A lot
is
of
not.
people are like, oh, I'm just going to sit on my couch and manifest this.
No.
And it's like, no. Life is all about change, and what you're describing is no change.
Yep.
It's, I want this comfortable, steady stream of serotonin to hit my... I want to sit here, do nothing out of the ordinary, feel no other feeling, and only be happy. And what you're describing is a very third-dimensional person way of thinking. Yeah. It is... you can't obtain happiness on that level, in fact, because there is no such thing as happiness on that level, because then happiness is only obtained through objects. It's obtained through doing.
Yeah, happiness is always fleeting then. And the thing is, you can remain at the pole in which you want to be in and be at the steady pace. But there's always going to... So I could be happy, but I'm a different fluctuation of happy. So I'm a different degree of happy. In other words... if someone said the only temperature I could go to the beach at is 86 degrees. So if it's 85 degrees, I can't go to the beach. If it's 87,
That's how most people live their life, by the way.
But yet... Well,
not with the beach. But
the average person won't go to the beach swimming if it's 20 degrees out. Mm-hmm. But there's a variance of degrees in which I go to the beach. There's a variance of degrees of what happiness is. All right? It's just a different degrees of the same thing. So I can be happy, but I'm going to be at different degrees of happy. Like when I wake up in the morning, I have a different happy. When I'm going to bed, I have a different happy. So I'm labeling it differently. So now, but I'm staying within the pole of the idea of happy. All right? And when I start getting out of happy, that sounded weird.
Readjust. I know what you mean. Yeah. I'm following.
I now say, well, why am I perceiving not being happy?
Or who?
Yeah.
Is perceiving not being
because
happy.
I get stuck on
and then you
event.
Go, the person. Yes. Am I the person? No.
Because what is happy? It's a feeling.
It is.
And the way I describe happy is going to be different than Mike. And the way I described happy from yesterday onto myself is going to be different. So it becomes relative into the moment in which I'm in. And in the present moment, there's a stillness where you go beyond even happiness to ecstasy, to peace.
Sat, Chit, Ananda.
Yeah.
And existence, consciousness, bliss.
And it can be had. But the goal isn't to get there because you'll drive yourself nuts. Because the idea of goals within the corporeal self is overcoming. I mean, it's kind of going for something you don't get there, you failed. Like, no, it's not about that. It can be achieved, but it doesn't have to be achieved, but when you do it in a paradox setting, so in other words, whether I'm happy as I can be or not, it doesn't matter. And right then and there, you fall into the degree of happiness. Different degrees.
It's in the letting go.
Yeah, it's letting go.
Absolutely.
And that's where the paradox lies. That's major power and paradox as we start to understand these principles. So to sum this up, there is empirically no opposition to us. We create the concept of it, and we create the concept of it, the physics of the world produce an opposition. So you're not lying. I don't say people like...
And we're not denying it.
Yeah, I don't deny it. But I'm saying when you're up here, there is no opposition. In other words, when I move beyond... If I move from the sub-basement or the basement of the floor and I move up into the upper levels of the building, now I can see the city. But when I'm in the basement, I can't see the city. I'm not lying, but the question is, why are you remaining in the basement if you want to see the skyline of the city? Well, this is where I'm at. I'm like, the skyline of the city will not come to the sub-basement. You must elevate up into the upper floors to see the skyline. That's a choice. But if you don't think it's a choice, you don't think it's possible, you can't experience it. So if you alter your perspective a little bit, you actually start to rip apart and expand your belief, because your belief is king in this world. So you ought not to go against your belief, but if you open up, you can actually mold your belief into whatever it is. I believe I can do this. I believe I can't do it. Well, if you don't believe you can fly, I wouldn't jump off the building.
And from there, Frank and I would say, who has that belief? Do they actually exist?
Well, if they have a flight suit on. No, like I'm not even joking. Like if I had a flight suit on, now I know I can fly. Or if I'm in an airplane, I know I can fly because you're flying. You might need an apparatus or permission slip to fly.
You know exactly.
Because I'm not a bird.
What I'm getting at.
Yeah.
You know, because sure, we can discuss all these concepts all day long, but at a level, they're all we're talking about is staying within the mind. Frank and I want you to know, the more you let go of the idea of this person, the more you begin to experience
the person,
self,
with
a capital S, or God, or universe, whatever you want to call this, that's going on right now. That's when you begin to experience it, when you're no longer seeing it through the eyes of I, this ego identity. Things make me happy or make me sad or control what out here controls how I feel in here. When that begins to fall away, which it does with continued practice, with continued, self-inquiry.
Yeah, but this can fall away in 10 years or can fall away now.
Absolutely.
There is no time in the universe. We create the concept of time. So in survival, there's linear time. In creative, all of a sudden we realize people are still noticing time, but they're realizing time is slipping them. It's like, oh my God, yeah. Time is altering as we get higher to these levels. And we know this because in the understanding of gravity, the further away we get from a gravitational pull, the slower time is. That's why when they do the twin experiment, one twin goes out, shoots out away from the Earth and goes up into outer space and 10 years, and then comes back 10 years, that's 20 years. The twin that was on the Earth aged 20 years. The one that went up and came down only aged 10. Because there's less of a gravitational pull away from the Earth, because the Earth is a mass which creates gravitational pull in the fabric of time. These are things they've proven. You take a watch and you wear it, and if you're flying all the time, it slows down. But if it's on the ground where there's a heavy gravitational pull, it speeds up. It maintains a different rate of speed. So when we rise to a higher level, we can literally manipulate time.
And this is what Einstein was talking about with the law of relativity.
Yeah, it is.
Everything is relative.
Yeah, it's relative to where you are in which time produces. So, but again, do I need time to slow down? No, I don't know why I need to. But what happens, it does. But, what am I trying to live to 200? If I live to 200, great. If my story takes me to 200 years old, great. But if it takes me to next week, great.
Either way, we're eternal.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just fall into another role.
Yeah.
I'll get another gig,
That's it.
Yep. Don't worry, Karen. I'm not going anywhere.
There you go.
Yeah. She might kill me. She might be the reason I don't make it to the next podcast. Because after this stupid... Actually, I'm blaming her. It's my fault if I don't make it to the next thing because she stuck a pillow on my head for the earlier comments. Yeah.
Took care of you.
Karen's like, you little son of a bitch. I'll show you. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, it is.
No, but... honestly, guys, thanks for tuning in this week.
Yep.
Kayla, thank you for your question.
Yep. And thank you for everything else you do.
Yeah, seriously, thank you. On top of that, guys, if you like what you're hearing or if you have any questions out there that you want to hear us talk about, feel free to shoot us an email, perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com, or even leave a comment below. We'd be happy to write back or talk about it on air.
Thanks, guys. Peace out.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.